everybody, let's continue with our vocab. Our next word is corporations. So, what are corporations? Corporations are basically large businesses that aren't just even like in one community, but are spread out all over the country. It might be better if I give you some examples. McDonald's is a large corporation. Nike is a large corporation. Target is a large corporation. Corporations have, because they're so big, they often have a board of directors who help them run, and a CEO, basically a person who is in charge of running the large, huge business that goes across borders in many cases. In the Industrial Revolution, corporations will begin. A stock market. Okay, here is basically what a stock market is. Any large company out there can sell stock, or they can sell part of their company. This might sound kind of weird, but you can become a part owner of a company. So McDonald's, for example, can sell stock in McDonald's. And if I think McDonald's is going to make a lot of money, I can buy some stock, and if McDonald's does better, the stock goes up. And I can make a little bit of profit off it. And if I buy part of McDonald's or stock in McDonald's, and McDonald's doesn't do well, the price will go down. Here's all the stock market really is, and this one's called the Dow Jones, and there are other forms of the stock market. All the stock market is basically, it takes what are a lot of the biggest companies that are out there that are in that country or in this market, all of the different companies that have stock, adds them up together and lets you know basically how are the big corporations and companies that have stock, how are they doing. And if the number goes up, most of the companies are doing well, and that means the economy is doing well. There's probably more jobs. And if the number is going down, that means companies aren't doing so well. You might have to let some employees go, and they're not doing so well. So the stock market basically tells you how a large number of companies are doing who are in that market. And this Dow Jones is one part of the stock market where many companies are in here, their stocks are in here, people buy and sell them, and if the prices go up, that means that people are doing well and they're making money off it. A stockholder is someone who wants to buy part of a company. For example, if I wanted to buy part of Apple or part of McDonald's, I could go and buy some stock in that company. That means I might be putting $100 into Apple, and if Apple makes money, that piece of paper I have that says I own part of Apple will go up. If Apple goes down, maybe now my stock was worth $100 originally, now it might be worth $95. If Apple goes up, it might be worth $105, and that means I made some money off it. So a stockholder is someone who buys stock in a company because they think, oh, I'll buy in that company because I can make some money. So you can either make money or lose money when you are a stockholder. A monopoly is basically when there's a single seller of a product, the product is unique, and no one else can sell it. So, for example, if I wanted to have a monopoly on oil, if I would buy all the oil fields around the world and I owned all the oil and I'm the only one who can sell it, what would I probably do to prices? I would bring them up because I can charge a lot of money. So monopoly means when you have a unique product and no one else can have it, or you can stop other people from selling your product and you're the only one that sells it. And then you can make a ton of money off it because nobody else can sell that product. If you played the game Monopoly, it's like that. If you own all the property, you have a monopoly on the property, and you can charge rent whatever you want to anybody else. And that is a monopoly. A tenement. A tenement is housing that is usually constructed quickly to put a whole lot of people in it. Think projects, for example. So in tenements would be lots of people would have to be forced to live in a small space where they don't have much room for their family, but they live there, and especially during the Industrial Revolution, tenements grew quickly as they had to bring in a whole lot of workers, especially immigrant workers, to work in the new factories. So tenement housing was housing that was made quickly, cheaply, and it was to house a whole lot of people in the new factories of the Industrial Revolution. Slums. Slums are areas where people live that are usually made out of cheap housing. It's not very good. It's usually in an urban area or in a city. And it's where many of the poor don't want to live but are forced to live because they can't afford anything else. The working class are basically the people who do a lot of the jobs with their hands. Working class are people who will do a lot of the jobs in the factories during the Industrial Revolution. And this will basically begin because people are brought into factories, they're having to do work with their hands, and they are called the working class. They're also often called blue-collar jobs. Blue-collar jobs because you wear a blue collar, you go in, you work with your hands. You don't work in an office. And this would be, the working class would be established during the Industrial Revolution with the rise of the factory system. White collar pretty much means people who would wear a white collar because they would work in an office. They would work with paperwork during this time in the Industrial Revolution. These would not be people who would work in their hands and wouldn't work directly in the factories or the factory system. Today we think of most people who work white collar jobs as factory office jobs. Many of you who go to your jobs at Cristo Rey work in white collar jobs. Captains of industry would be people who would be seen as people who start jobs, people who create jobs because they create factories. Some people would call them really good for the economy in the world because they give money back to the community, they create jobs. People have jobs because they've started this new factory system. They increase products. People have more products for cheap that they could buy, so they would say they're very good because they're starting all these things. An opposing point of view is some people didn't like the captains of industry in the Industrial Revolution. They called them even robber barons. They said they took advantage of workers and didn't pay them enough, and they were greedy, basically. The cult of domesticity basically started in the Industrial Revolution, and this was for women who were married to mainly men who had white-collar jobs or were owners of the factories, but they were supposed to be really masters of domestic area, of their house, having parties, being like seen as being high up in the society in the new cities where they lived. They weren't supposed to work. They were supposed to keep charge of the family, and in many cases even run the family where they would have maids and other servants. And this is the cult of domesticity that was seen as the women's sphere, especially for people who made enough money where the women did not have to work in the time of the Industrial Revolution. Unions were basically places where workers could organize. They were organizations for workers. Basically, a union was a place, or is a place, they still exist today. Unions were basically where workers could organize and they could demand more rights. Many unions would be workers would organize for less working hours, or for higher pay, or for safer working conditions. So what would happen is the workers would organize, and they would say, well, we're going to all get together, organize all our workers, and we'll talk to the owner and say, well, listen, you need to pay us more. You need to give us more rights in the workplace. You need to give us safer conditions. And what would happen many times at unions, if the owners of the factories would say no to these, they could have the ultimate threat, which would be a strike, where they would gather the workers together and say, okay, we're not going to go to work then. We're not going to go to work, and your factory won't be able to work while we go on this strike. A bit risky because you could lose your job if you did that, but if people could organize all together, what they could do is they could demand rights together to get them from the employer so they could have better working and living conditions. The proletariat. The proletariat would be very similar to working class. The proletariat would be seen as the common workers who work in the factories during the Industrial Revolution. They are seen as the people who pretty much do the work, do the jobs with their hands. They are not the owners of the factories, but they are the workers in the factories. The proletariat will be used by Karl Marx as we see the rise of communism come up in this area. As Karl Marx will say, the proletariat should rise up and they should take owner of the factories and distribute the resources to people as they need. Another word is bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie would be a completely different situation than the proletariat. The bourgeoisie would be the people who own the factories, the managers, the people up who make more money. They would be the owners. The captains of industry would be bourgeoisie. And these would be people who would start the factories, who would run them. Karl Marx would use this term to say that these people were exploiting the workers. The bourgeoisie point of view would be, well, there'd be no job if I didn't start this factory. And yes, I make more, but I also took a lot of risk to get this factory up and going, and if it goes under, I go under too. So those would be different point of views on the bourgeoisie and the proletariat.